Today is Monday, July 18th, 2016. My name is Ann Peskin. It is my honor and privilege to interview Randy Skigen for the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County. Good morning. Please tell us your name.
I'm Randall Skigen, go by Randy.
Where and when were you born?
I was born here in Stamford, May 5th, 1957.
And how old are you?
That makes me 59.
Good man. Who were your grandparents?
My grandparents on my father's side were Bessie and Saul Skigen. And on my mother's side, Ray and Saul Goldman.
And where did they live?
My father's parents lived on West Main Street. They had a small variety store that they ran over there, and lived a couple of doors up from the store in an apartment building. My grandparents on my mother's side, by the time I was born, had moved to Kenilworth Drive, down by Past Cove Park.
And where did your parents live?
By the time I was born, they were on Hickory Way in Springdale.
Oh, and how'd they earn a living?
My mother was a nurse, first at the Stamford Hospital, where she worked in labor and delivery, and then she subsequently, in order to have more control over her hours, went to the Stamford school system and was a nurse in the Stamford Public Schools. My father was an insurance salesman, and then later an investment advisor.
And what was your Jewish background in terms of education?
I went to Temple Beth El for religious school. My grandparents, both sets, were members of Agudas Shalom. My parents were members of Beth El. I was a bar mitzvah at Beth El when it was back on Prospect Street. And currently, my family and I are members of Temple Sinai, so we've covered all three of the major temples here in town.
Was your parents involved in any politics over the years?
More on the periphery. I think they got involved with a few campaigns. Politics was a constant source of discussion in our house at the dinner table. We would talk about what was going on in the world and our views of what was going on. And it was encouraged that we think about the issues and get involved.
How many children in the family?
I have an older brother and an older sister.
And now, where'd you go to school?
I started at Springdale School, just down the street from here. I then went to Dolan Junior High School before we had such a thing as middle schools, and then Stamford High School. After graduating from Stamford High, I went to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, and then Cornell Law School.
What did you major in?
At Northwestern, I was a political science major.
Were you interested and involved in any politics at school?
I was involved before I went to Northwestern. I was one of the youth coordinators on the McGovern campaign here in town. At school, I got involved with a local legislative race in Chicago and learned a lot about bare knuckle politics while I was there. After I graduated, before I went to law school, I came back and I got a job working with Ernie Abate, who was then Speaker of the House of Representatives for the state of Connecticut. So I worked for Ernie, as well as Tom Serrani, who was then a state rep and later became mayor here in Stamford. I worked for them for 2 years.
Really involved. Um, who, who was your political hero when you were growing up?
I would say my historical hero was clearly Lincoln. Someone who was able to keep the country together in a time when it was trying to pull itself apart. Was always very impressive. My contemporary hero as I was growing up was probably George McGovern, because he stood up at a time when it wasn't necessarily easy to do so, and although he was very unsuccessful in the presidential run, just to get the nomination was an incredible accomplishment.
Now, what would you define as politics?
That's a really interesting question. I would say probably the best definition for me is trying to bring diverse groups together within your community and form a working consensus that allows you to move forward.
Why did you decide to go into politics?
I had always had an interest, obviously, based on what I had done growing up. When my wife and I decided to move back to the area, when we were first married, we lived in Battery Park City in New York. When we decided to move back, we looked at Stamford, we looked at New Canaan, we looked at Greenwich, and along with Stamford being a better bargain than the other towns, there was the possibility of getting involved in politics here as a Democrat, which didn't really exist in Greenwich or New Canaan. So that was part of, not a major factor, but a factor in deciding where we were going to live.
So how'd you get into the politics, being in Stamford now?
I had known some of the players from back in my high school days. The house we bought is in North Stamford, and the district that I live in, which is District 19, in the modern history of Stamford, since the city and town merged, had one Democrat who had been elected in that district. And interestingly, it was the person who became my co-representative, David Martin, who is now the mayor of the city of Stamford. When I first expressed an interest in politics, I went to the party chair, Ellen Camhigh, and she interviewed me. She thought that I should get some seasoning, so I asked for an appointment to the Charter Revision Committee, or Commission actually, and I served on the Charter Revision Commission that made some big changes to how government in Stamford runs. And the year after we wrapped up, I ran for my first go at the Board of Representatives. I lost that election by 33 votes, I believe, to a woman who had been on the board for 16 years at that point. Audrey Mayhawk. And I decided I would run again 2 years later. I was told by Ellen Camhigh, the party chair, that I could never win a seat up there in that district. That the people might be willing to elect one Democrat, but certainly weren't going to elect two. And I worked hard along with David, and we were both successful in winning seats, and that was 1995.
Oh, now, what office have you held?
I've been a member of the Board of Representatives since 1995. My first 6 years on the board, I served as chair of the Personnel Committee, which oversees labor contracts, labor negotiations, dealings with the unions. And then I was appointed as chair of the Fiscal Committee, which oversees the city budget and city spending, and served there for 8 years. And then 7 years ago, I was elected as president of the board.
So you've been elected, been involved 7 years as president.
Yeah, I'm finishing up my 7th year right now.
Wow. Can you tell us a story about one or more of your mentors? I kind of heard Camai.
I would say probably one of the more important personal mentors was Ernie Abate. When I worked for Ernie, he was, I believe, in his 3rd term as a state representative, and after 2 terms, he decided to run for the Speaker of the General Assembly. And people told him he was out of his mind, that he was too young. He was in his 30s at that point, and he wasn't seasoned enough, and he wasn't ready. Ernie pointed out that no speaker in the history of the state of Connecticut up to that point had served more than 2 terms. And the person he was running against was Jim Kennelly, who was running for a 3rd term. And due to Ernie's hard work, he was able to overcome. Jim Kennelly also happened to be the son-in-law of John Bailey, who was the dean of Connecticut politics, Connecticut Democratic politics. But Ernie ran for and won the speakership, and I went to work for him shortly thereafter.
Who were your supporters up in the district?
My district happens to be the one with the most registered Republicans in the city. It's slightly more Republicans than Democrats, a lot of independents as well, unaffiliated voters. And to win an election up there, you really need to appeal across the board. And I would say that the vast majority of issues in Stamford are not necessarily political in the sense of Democrat versus Republican. On the Board of Reps, I would estimate a good 90% of our votes are unanimous votes. On those issues where we do disagree, I think if you can appeal to voters by making sense, making them understand that you're going to look out for the interests not only of the neighborhood but of the city, and that you're going to work hard, I think you can gather support across party lines. And that's been necessary in order to win in my district.
What were some of the obstacles that you faced?
Even though I was a Stamford native, kind of being new to the district, having grown up in Springdale and then running in North Stamford, being a Democrat in a district that historically had always voted Republican for the Board of Reps as well as for other city offices. I think politically those were probably the major difficulties.
Now, you have to get on the ballot. What's the process involved?
Nominations come from the Democratic City Committee or Republican Town Committee. You need to get the support of the city committee people. There are 2 representing each district. And if you can get their support, then you can get on the ballot. If you don't get their support, you need to petition. In my district, the fact that there was a 2nd Democrat willing to run, they were more than happy to have me on the ballot.
You're lucky. How did you feel campaigning? Because What was the way you campaigned? You mentioned sort of how you started.
The majority of the campaigning, certainly in the early campaigns, was door to door. And along with being the most Republican district in the city, the 19th district is also geographically the largest district in the city, which makes it very hard within an election cycle, considering most people don't want to pay attention until after Labor Day. David, Martin, and I would go out, starting at 5:30 or 6 o'clock each day, and choose a neighborhood or a street, park our car at the top of the street, and go to every house on that street, knock on doors if people were home. You speak to them and tell them who you are, and if they weren't, you would leave a flyer at their door with your name and phone number and ask them to give a call if they had any questions. We also did mailings. We tried to do whatever events we could that would attract a lot of people within the district.
What kind of event?
So, if there were something going on at the Stanford Museum and Nature Center, you try to show up and have a big button on and go around and shake people's hands and introduce yourself. I think when people see that you're working hard in a campaign, excuse me, they'll assume that you'll work hard for them once you get into office as well.
Did you raise money?
Yeah, you start off with family and friends. Most people in that first campaign are not willing to write a check for an unknown. And then, in future years, you reach out to a broader audience. I would say, I'd have to go back and look at records, but I would say the most I ever spent on a campaign was probably in the $4,000 or $5,000 range, as opposed to the way things have gone in the city at the mayor's level. The campaigns are now costing $500,000, but at the local level, the district level, it's still somewhat reasonable.
Is it more or less now? Because how many times have you had to be elected? Is it, every 2 years?
No, in part of that charter change that I was involved with, that was voted on in '95, changed the term of office from 2 years to 4 years. So I ran in '95. That didn't take effect until after the '97 election. So it was '95, '97, and then 2001, 5, 9, 13.
Must be getting a little easier as time goes on.
In some ways, in others, it's harder. Over the course of 21 years, you've almost certainly done something to upset, a voter, a number of voters, a large number of voters in your district. And a lot of people tend to remember the one thing that upset them as opposed to, the other things that they appreciated at the time.
Were you I don't think so. Were you involved in any debates?
We've done some limited debates in North Stanford Association. We'll, in some years, bring the district candidates in. So there were a couple of years that we did do debates.
Did you feel comfortable doing it?
Certainly the first run or second run, you're less comfortable because you have less mastery of the issues. As you actually do your work on the board, you become much more familiar with the issues. Particularly once I got involved with the fiscal committee, you're looking at every line in the budget. And our budget now, between the city side and the school side, is $500 million annually. So you really start to dig down on the details when you're in fiscal, and you start to get more of a mastery of a lot of the issues.
Well, what are some of the issues that you feel were important that you either participated in or led?
You know, you have recurring issues. You've got things like the budget every year. You always have to balance the need for services with the desire of people not to see their taxes go up. It's been somewhat inevitable that taxes have gone up. 70 to 80% of our budget is personnel costs. That's actually not true. 70 to 80% of the budget, once you take away debt service and pension costs, are related to personnel. And you know, we're dealing with unions, and it's rare that a union is going to agree to a 0 or 1% increase. So you're always looking to balance revenue and income and services. And cities are unfortunate in Connecticut in that our real sole source of income, almost sole source of income, is property taxes. And people seem to feel that more, well, I won't say more, but seem to feel it more sharply than they do income taxes. Because income taxes come out every week, and you kind of get used to it. But you get that big property tax bill twice a year, and people really recognize it, and they get upset about it. Now, there have been years when we have both been forced to raise taxes and cut services, which is clearly one of the most challenging things you have to do, because people want more service and less tax, and you're saying we're going to give you less service and more tax. But we're in a position as a municipality where we have to balance the budget. We don't have any choice. So, we try to be as aggressive as we can about collecting taxes. We try to look for other revenue sources, such as building permits and conveyance taxes. But that's as far as we can go in looking for sources of revenue.
Now, the Board of Reps plays what specific role in all of this?
The Board of Reps in the budget process is the sort of the caboose on the train. The mayor proposes a budget each year. The Board of Finance and the Board of Reps can cut from that budget but cannot add to it. The Board of Finance takes the first slice of the budget, and after they're finished, the Board of Reps then gets their chance to make any reductions. Usually the Board of Finance has taken a significant chunk, and the Board of Representatives is kind of looking at the margins and saying, can we save 20,000 here and 50,000 there? But the major cuts tend to come from the Board of Finance.
What was the proudest moment in your life in terms of politics?
That's an interesting question. I would say we were faced with a crisis. We got a phone call one afternoon, a conference call from then Mayor Malloy's operations director, Ben Barnes, who is now Governor Malloy's finance director for the state. And Ben told us that there was a report that had been floating around for months that he had just seen that indicated that a landfill, former landfill, excuse me, on Schofield Town Road in my district, was seriously polluted with two chemicals in particular, dieldrin and chlordane, that were known carcinogens. And Ben was calling to look for David Martin's view, my view, as to what we should do. And we told him that the park itself, there was a playground in the area and tennis court, should be closed immediately that day. The phone call was at around 4 o'clock, so they closed it the next morning. And that we needed to move forward on getting remediation and finding out if the pollution had leached into drinking water. We found that there were many houses in the area that had those chemicals in their drinking water. So all those homes are on wells, not served by what people call city water. It was at that point close to the end of Mayor Malloy's term, and we fought hard to get water mains brought into the neighborhoods that were affected. When Mayor Pavia came into office, he was interested in kind of moving away from any further discussion regarding the park and remediation. So when he came into office was the same time that I was elected as president of the Board of Reps by my members. And one of the first things I did was set up a special water quality committee that still exists and that has done a lot in order to make sure that any homeowner in North Stamford who wants to get their well tested can get it done at a reasonable cost. And I would say, there was initially a lot of reluctance among homeowners to know whether or not their water was polluted because they were afraid it was going to impact the resale value of their home. And I think that I, along with people at the health department, were able to convince homeowners, many homeowners, that your resale value pales in comparison to the health impact that might happen to you or your children if you're drinking, bathing, cooking with water that has carcinogens. So I think the city did a lot. I think I was one of the leaders on that issue, and that's certainly one of my proudest accomplishments.
I can understand that. What is one of the most regrettable moments looking at the other side?
I think there were things going on that we did not look at aggressively enough. The scrap metal scandal that went on. I think the board probably could have taken a more active role in that. I think there was a sense that other parts of the government were taking care of that, so we kind of sat back. One thing people should understand is we have an incredibly large Board of Representatives, which is our city council. We are 40. And I've heard, but I've never checked, that makes us the third largest city council in the country. New York is bigger, Chicago is bigger.
Good company.
And sometimes it's the equivalent of trying to herd squirrels. You've got people going in all different directions and trying to get people to focus on a particular issue is sometimes difficult. That's one of the reasons that water quality is such a proud moment for me, because the affected districts really cover only 6, maybe 8 representatives who have constituents that are on wells. So to be able to get 32, 34 other people whose districts were not affected to agree to do that was something of a struggle, but ultimately very successful.
Did being Jewish have any hindrance in your political career?
I don't think so. I think perhaps in other parts of the city it might have, but I think my district tends to be more highly educated and less anti-Semitic than other parts of the city might be.
Tell me, would you want your children to be in politics? Are they, or would you want them to be?
Only if they want it to be. It's not easy. It's become more difficult in the last 5 to 10 years with social media, where people can attack you anonymously online, and that's somewhat disheartening at times. It's one thing to have a person come up to you face to face and say, you know, I disagree with you, you're wrong, and you can say, okay, let's talk about it, as opposed to someone hiding behind a pseudonym online and, you know, making wild allegations about you. So would I want my children to go into it? Only if they had a passion for it.
Does it look that way?
No, my daughter, I think, wants to go into medicine, and my son is interested in technology. But my daughter is, you know, politically alert and aware and savvy, and, you know, enjoys sitting down and discussing politics with me. So.
Now, what legacy would you say you are leaving behind? Hopefully you'll be in it for a long time.
You know, ultimately I'll leave that for others to judge. One of the things that I've tried to do, we've seen a little bit of leakage from the national level in terms of extreme partisanship, and it's on both sides of the aisle, but I would say it's probably more so on the other side of the aisle. And I've tried to work as closely and as fairly with the minority on the board as with the majority. We have a tradition that committees are made up and committees are chaired in roughly the same percentage as you have Democrats and Republicans on the board. So there was one year that I was in that it was 32 Democrats and 8 Republicans. Right now we're, I think, 25-15. So Republicans have about 40% of the chairmanships. They have about 40% of the membership on every committee. You know, sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes it's a little lower. Never goes over 50. But you know, I've tried to have an open, transparent, which is a word I've grown tired of, but transparent leadership style, and I've tried to, you know, be as fair as I can. You know, I, in some ways, kind of think of myself as the equivalent of a baseball umpire. I'm just there to call balls and strikes, and not to try to influence the game too much. You know, clearly in my caucus, I try to convince the Democrats to vote a particular way on certain issues. But one of the interesting things about being president is you don't get to debate items on the floor. And
is that hard or easy for you?
at times it's very hard, and there have been times that I've been very tempted to yield the chair, which you're allowed to do under the rules, and let someone else run the meeting so that I can go down and talk on an issue. But I haven't done it yet. I've come close, but
have we left out anything that you would like to add to this interview?
Only that, because this is the Jewish Historical Society, I think that, my Jewish upbringing and the way I was raised, both by my parents and within the Jewish community, probably led me towards politics in the sense that, one of the things we learned about was tikkun olam, repairing the world. And that to me is a noble purpose. And I think that's one of the things that led me to get involved.
Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed it. I hope you've
I have.
enjoyed it.